Peace, and peace. Hope everybody's doing well. Welcome to Striking Resemblance, Episode 8. Workers at Freddy's Diner, which is where Margaret worked, recognized the misery overwhelming Margaret and offered a considerable amount of support. Pity, along with the fact that even with her lack of communication, Margaret was a kind and gentle woman, caused some of the workers to look out for her. On days when her thoughts had her trapped in a world uncomprehending to others, Margaret sometimes forgot to go to work. She had no phone at her apartment, but she lived only a block or two from Freddy's. Co-workers would go to Margaret's place in hopes of getting her to go in for at least a shift. Most times, she would return to work with them. Other times, though, she would be too depressed to even get up and answer the door. Whoever may have been the one to go check on Margaret, after getting no answer at the door, would go down to the street and look up to see Margaret sitting and staring out the window. Seeing her would at least verify the fact that she was alive, physically at least. On one particular morning, a young woman in her early 30s named Angie knocked on Margaret's door. She worked with Margaret and was one of the workers who regularly checked on her. "Miss Margaret, are you in there? You know it's time for you to work. It's a nice day outside, too. You don't want to miss all the sunshine. You got some mail out here, too," Angie said through the door as she lightly knocked. A few minutes passed before the clicking of a lock being unlocked sounded from the other side of the door. The door opened and Margaret was standing in her dingy uniform with a sweater slung over one arm and a small tote bag, which held only an umbrella and a Bible hanging on the other. "Are you doing okay, Miss Margaret?" Angie asked as she handed Margaret her mail. "Yes," Margaret answered with an emotionless expression on her face as she took the pieces of mail and began opening them. There was one particular letter Margaret focused most of her attention. After glancing over the letter, Margaret looked back up at Angie with a smile and continued, "I'm doing just fine." Angie was a short, big-boned, cocoa brown complexion woman who was devoted to the Baptist church. She had a cute face with pretty white teeth, which surrounded a small gap in between her top and front teeth. Her eyes were dark brown, and she wore a small diamond nose ring. She was always very pleasant, even though she had somewhat of a dramatic life of her own. Her parents had died earlier. Her parents had died years earlier. She had no brothers or sisters, and her husband was an alcoholic. But she kept her faith in God. Angie was never used to seeing Margaret smile with her teeth showing. Most time, Margaret was extremely slight and barely noticeable. Most time, Margaret's smile was extremely slight and barely noticeable. So the brightness in Margaret's face on this day was a surprise. "You got some good news, Miss Margaret?" Angie asked. "Yes," Margaret began. "Very good news," she continued as she handed Angie the letter. The letter was the usual telegram which Margaret periodically received, and it read, "Mrs. Buckley, we have had a lead. It is imperative that I see you in order to discuss the steps that we will further be taking. Please come to my office as soon as possible. Signed, Detective Archibald." "This is good news, Miss Margaret. I guess you had better get yourself together and catch a bus downtown. Come on," Angie said as she gently took Margaret by the arm and went back inside the apartment. Once inside, Angie helped Margaret bathe and get dressed. She then took Margaret outside to a bus stop and put her on a bus headed for town. Margaret already knew what bus to get on and where to get off. She had done it many times before. But Angie, caring a lot for Margaret, made sure the bus driver knew where he should let Margaret off. She also made sure to look out for Margaret. Even ever since she had known her, Angie regarded Margaret as a sort of motherly figure. She never talked about mother-daughter things and only spent time mostly at work. However, there was an unspoken love between the two. They occasionally went to church together, though Margaret's faith had wavered over the years. She could not understand God's ways. It was this lack of understanding that caused her to believe God was in some way letting her down. What had she done to deserve so much pain? She read the Bible and prayed, and even when she did not even realize it, but still could not understand. She read the Bible and prayed even when she didn't even realize it, but still could not understand why her life was so mercilessly taken away. Maybe it was because she abandoned her parents and younger siblings. Who knew? Hopefully the news she got Hopefully the news she had gotten in that telegram was an indication of the fact that God was bestowing a little mercy, finally. Chapter 5. I came to bring the pain, hardcore from the brain, a tall, skinny black teen yells as he runs back down the basketball court after dunking the basketball. Y'all can't stop me. I'm the motherfucking man, he continues. His name is Terrell Taz Buckley, a local kid who belongs to one of Peter's youth groups. A few months prior, Taz was found lying in an alley near one of the centers in the city, bleeding profusely from 3 bullet wounds to the chest and midsection. He was only 15 years old, but belonged to a local gang called ATL Mobsters. Apparently, he had been caught in the alley by what was believed to have been a rival gang, shot and left for dead. Several other teenagers who were on their way to the youth center in the city saw Taz in the alley on the ground and immediately ran to inform Peter. Peter, along with a few other counselors from the center, put Taz in one of the center's vans and took him to the hospital. Taz was unconscious when they found him, and his pulling through was doubtful. But he did, with Peter, who had been checking on him daily, standing close by. How are you feeling, young man? Peter asked while standing next to the hospital bed Taz occupied. I'm cool. But look, man, just like I told those other detectives, I don't know who shot me, Taz says as he turned his gaze from Peter to the television where cartoons were playing. I'm not a detective, young bruh. My name is Peter, and I run a youth center not far from here where you were shot. The police told me you didn't have any family, Peter began before being interrupted by Taz. What you mean? I got family. ATL Mobsters is my family. They're going to be coming to get me in a few. As soon as they find out where I'm at, Taz said half angrily. Well, bruh, you've been here for 5 days already and no one has asked about you, nor has anyone come to visit, Peter explained. 5 days? You lying, Taz exclaimed. When you woke up this morning, you were waking up from a 5-day rest. Don't you find it strange that you're watching Saturday morning cartoons and you were shot on Monday? Peter pointed out. Well, my boys just don't know where I'm at. That's all, Taz replied in an attempt to fool himself into believing that he had not been abandoned. It's not true. I don't think you know it. The police saw that mobster tattoo on your chest and they questioned some of them about the shooting. They claim to not even know you. What'd you do, man? Why'd your own crew try to kill you? Peter asked. Man, you crazy. My boys wouldn't do no shit like that, Taz answered without looking at Peter. Then why did they claim not to know you? And why won't you tell the police who shot you? Peter asked. Taz answered only with silence. You told the police they wore masks, but you know who they were, don't you? Peter asked. Taz still remained silent. Tears began to stream uncontrollably from the corners of his eyes to his ears. His lips trembled as he tried to speak, but emotions overwhelmed him and all he could do was cry. Peter in turn grabbed Taz's hand from his face and said, Don't worry, young blood. I got your back. After Taz was released from the hospital in Peter's custody, of course, he was taken to a group home outside of the city, which Peter also founded. It was basically a large ranch house which sat on a little over 5 acres of land. There were a few cows, horses, chickens, roosters, and goats. There was also a large vegetable garden and some fruit trees. The upkeep of the animals in the garden was the responsibility of the youth who were housed there. Most of the kids were ex-gang members, teen prostitutes, and other youth who were on the wrong paths. The purpose of this particular group home was to serve as a sort of fresh start for youth who had not had a fair shake in life. Peter felt a deep compassion for all human beings, but more so for youth. He himself had experienced the cruelty with which society imposed on its less fortunate youth, but still he turned out to be a success. He had hoped he could in some way contribute to the success of other youth who were facing that which he had overcome. Though the youth who had lots of responsibilities, there was always time to set aside for recreation or other personal time with which the teens could do their own thing. And with that, I'm going to end it. Say peace. Keep following me for episode 9. Peace.